Welcome to the Unleash Greatness podcast with your host, Jonathan Mitchell. The best in personal, emotional, spiritual, and business development.
Hello, everybody. It is I, Jonathan Mitchell. Today is book review day. I get to do one of my favorites and a classic. I'm actually going to do a couple of classics in the next couple of weeks, but this one is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. So I actually had the chance before he passed away. He came up during my undergrad and did a quick little session with my senior team. We were a consulting team, and so he came up and did some conversation around some of the habits, and they truly an insightful book, pretty powerful. I know it's one that most people have read, but just in case you haven't, I just want to make sure I could talk about it since I used to work there and kind of got all the information around the habits, which is awesome. Again, if you want more, go to unleashg.com for more podcasts or blogs. This is sponsored by naturalmedicinemoms.com for any help around products or advice around alternative or natural medicine. For men, women, children, amazing stuff. I use it, love it. Please use it. Go to it and enjoy and bask in its glory. Okay, here we go. All right, everybody. So today is book review day. Just a quick synopsis, just in case you're listening in for maybe the first or second time. Monday is interview day. Tuesday, I get to talk about the MBA program and any thoughts I have surrounding the MBA program. Today is book review day on Wednesdays. Tomorrow is on my story time. I get to find cool articles or stories from friends and share those. And Friday is spiel day, where I just get to riff and wing it and just talk about whatever subject I happen to want to talk about. So today is book review day. I get to work with and talk about one of my favorite books. So for those of you that didn't know, I used to work with Franklin Covey for a couple of years on their team. I used to sell their content and products and actually got trained as a facilitator in 7 Habits and leadership and the 4 Decisions of Execution, their sales program. I went through as many as I could because I love the content. Today, though, we're going to talk about just the 7 habits of highly effective people. So if you haven't read this, and maybe you have, and maybe this is just a good review for you, there are the book opens with a good explanation of how many individuals have achieved a high degree of outward success and still find themselves struggle with an inner need to develop a personal effectiveness and grow healthy relationships with other people. So Stephen R. Covey, just a quick thing I mentioned before, he actually came up to my university when I was in my undergrad. I was one of the leaders of my undergrad consulting team. We were going into leadership development and consulting back in my undergrad. He came up and actually knew my professor, and so he came up and lectured for a couple days in a row about the 7 habits and what he does and what he suggests for our careers and that kind of stuff. And it was really insightful to listen just to him kind of talk about all this, all the content that he has. He was an amazing man. Love his perspective and what he had to do. So Covey, Stephen R. Covey believes that the way that we see the world is entirely based on our perceptions. And in order to change a situation, we must change ourselves. And in order to change ourselves, we have to change our perceptions, according to Covey. So a little bit about him and how this book came about. So he, like many people like him, did a lot of studying over literature over a concept of success. And so he got his own perspective of what that means in order to have success and identified a very important change in the way that we have defined success. And so in earlier times, the foundation of success rested upon the character, things like integrity, humility, fidelity, temperance, courage, justice, patience, industry, simplicity, golden rule. But around the 1920s, the way people shifted success went to what's called a personality ethic, which is more about public image and attitudes. And so it's more about personality as opposed to character. So, and one thing he points out, which is interesting because he wrote this book a long, long time ago, is even then people were looking for a quick fix. They want to say, okay, how do you get successful? Teach me how to do it as fast as possible. The shortcuts, though, in order to help for saving time and energy and effort, are just what he suggests are Band-Aids and will yield in short-term solutions and results instead of addressing the underlying problem or condition. And so one thing I love about Covey is he thought differently about how to see problems. And he even said the way we see the problem is the problem. We must allow ourselves to undergo a paradigm shift to change ourselves fundamentally and not just alter our attitudes and behaviors on the surface level. We must achieve a true change. And so the habits are about creating a true change inside of a person from the inside out. So as a synopsis, in case you don't know what the 7 habits are, let me go over those real quick. So number 1 is be proactive. Number 2 is begin with the end in mind. Number 3 is put first things first. Number 4 is think win-win. Number 5 is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Number 6 is synergize. And number 7 is sharpen the saw. So 1, 2, and 3 are focused more on self-mastery, going from a dependent mindset to an independent mindset. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are developed on teamwork, collaboration, and communication skills, going from independence to interdependence. And then number 7 is on continual growth and improvement in embodied other habits. He actually came out with a book later on that was about habit 8, which I may talk about that another time, but I want to focus on these 7 for right now. So to begin with habit 1, just real quick, I'm going to talk about each one of these quickly because I know we want to keep these short for you. But the first habit he talks about is being proactive. That's what one thing he talks about is one thing that differentiates us from animals and other beings on the planet is our ability to examine our character, to view ourselves and our situations, and to control our effectiveness. In other words, to be proactive. So reactive people take a passive stance. They believe the world is happening to them. Like he said, some things they say is this is the way I am. There's nothing I can do. And they think that the problem is out there, and reactivity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and reactive people feel victimized and out of control. Proactive people, though, recognize they have a responsibility, or like he says, a responsibility, which Covey defines as the ability to choose how you respond to a given stimulation or to a given situation or whatever happens to you. One of the quotes he has, it is our willing permission, our consent to what happens to us that hurts us far more than what happened to us in the first place. Very interesting. So he has one of the pictures in the book, he talks about 2 different circles. So one is you have a circle of concern and then a circle of influence. A circle of concern, like from the proactive standpoint, you go from the inside out. You think, I have more control of this than I think, as opposed to the reactive, which thinks the negative energy comes in and has more control over my inner world than I do. So in order to practice, as an example, to practice habit 1, you want to start looking at proactive language instead of reactive language. So an example, reactive would be, they make me feel this. Like, he makes me so sad, they make me so happy, they make me so whatever. If someone else makes me something emotion, that's reactive. Proactive is saying, I control my feelings. So you would say, I choose to be happy around this person. I choose to be sad around this person. Like that kind of thing is just taking more of a proactive stance. Next is habit 2, which is begin with the end in mind. Now, one thing he talked a lot about, and we talked a lot about in the company, was just starting with a clear destination in your mind. We can use our imagination to develop a vision, and we can use our conscious to decide what values will guide us. And overall, he talks about it's really easy to be busy, to just be busy moving around doing stuff. We work hard to achieve victories like promotions, higher income, more recognition, but we don't often stop to evaluate the meaning behind the business, behind the victories. We don't ask ourselves if these things we focus on is what really matters to us. And so what he suggests, everything we do should begin with the end in mind. Start with a clear destination, not just of the promotion, but of your overall life and what you're looking to accomplish. So this is kind of a self-aware. He just talks about being more self-aware, empowers us to shape our lives instead of living our lives by a default, just letting things happen. And so before you move out, move towards a goal, the question you want to ask is, what are we trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do with this action? So as an example, there's a couple things we want to be just working around. So if to know how centered your life is, to know what's going on, let's just say if your feelings of security are based on the way your spouse treats you, or if you get your direction from what your own needs or from needs of your spouse, your life is spouse-centered. If your security is founded on family acceptance and fulfilling family expectations, you are family-centered. If your personal worth is determined by your net worth and your profit is your decision-making criteria, you're money-centered. If you're defined by your occupational role, you're work-centered. If your reputation or your security is based on your reputation, social status, or the things you have like cars or houses, you're possession-centered. If you make decisions based on what will most pleasure in the world, like having fun, going on vacations, whatever, that's pleasure-centered. If your security is a function of the social mirror, you're dependent on opinions of others, you are friend-centered. If you make decisions on what will thwart your enemy or because you think I'm going to make sure they know I'm going to be successful, blah, 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 you're enemy-centered. If your security is based on church activity or any type of spiritual work, you're spiritual or church-centered. And lastly, is your security constantly changing and shifting your view of your world by how decisions, events, or circumstances will affect you as self-centered. Our centers affect us fundamentally. They determine our daily decisions, actions, and motivations. However, Covey notes that none of these centers are optimal. Instead, we should focus and strive to be principle-centered. I need to identify the timeless, unchanging principles by which we live our lives. And these give us guidance so we can align our behaviors and our beliefs and our values towards these principles. Which, again, these habits are some principles we can work on. So, as an example, to practice habit 2, one of the things they talk about is visualizing your own funeral. Like, what do you want to have people say about you when you die? Like, what would you have them say? What things would you accomplish? How would you change your life if you knew you only had 30 days to live? That's an example. Break down different roles in your life, like focus on professional, personal, community. Write 3 to 5 goals you want to achieve in each location. And then last is define what scares you. Is it writing a book? Is it speaking in public? Is it writing a song? Write down a worst case scenario for your biggest fear and then how you'll handle the situation. Write down exactly how you handle it. So put the fear in open and make sure you can just, conquer it. Next is put first things first. In order to manage ourselves effectively, we must put first things first. So there's probably a video online. I'm sure you could find it. It's with Stephen R. Covey. He has a lady come up and he has this big old jar and he has some small balls and he has some big balls. I think there's marbles or something like that. Anyway, so he brings her up and he talks about this concept saying, oh no, I think it's sand. He has these balls or rocks and he has sand. So when he brings this lady up, he says, okay, I'm going to put the sand in first and then we're going to put the rocks in. I want you to put all the rocks inside of that and the sand. So she puts the sand in first and then tries to stuff the rocks in afterwards. And of course, if you watch the video, she's not able to get everything fixed in there, right? So the sand goes in first and the sand is so compacted and so thick that as soon as she tries to put the rocks in there, there's just not enough room for the rocks. And then he said, okay, let's try something different. Let's put the rocks in first and then let's put the sand in and see how it works. And then so she did it the opposite, where instead of putting the sand in first, she put the rocks in first and then put the sand in. And strangely enough, the same container can hold everything if the rocks go in first. So his metaphor is that this is just like our lives. We need to put the first things first and find what the most important things are in our lives, and then let all the busy stuff, all the sand stuff, the things we have to do as part of it, come as a result. So what things do you need to get done? What are the big rocks that you need to move in your life to get that done? So to help you define this, he had a little a time management matrix. So there was on the left side, if you were to write on a pen and paper, and you had a box. On the left side of the box, the top left, you had important. Bottom left, you had not important. On the top of the box, you had the top left of the top of the box would be urgent, and the top right of the box would be not urgent. In quadrant 1, so if you had a piece of paper and you had 4 squares in the piece of paper, on the upper left square is quadrant 1, which is about crises, activities, deadline-driven products, that kind of thing. To the upper right box is quadrant 2, which is relationship building, recognizing new opportunities. So these are things that are important but not urgent. The upper left one are important and urgent. On the bottom left one is urgent but not important, like interruptions, phone calls, meetings, emails, that kind of stuff. And then quadrant 4, which is not urgent and not important, which is just, chilling out, watching Netflix, trivial, busy work, time wasters, that kind of stuff. So if we focus on quadrant 1 and we spend our time managing crises, they'll just start to consume us. We'll get burnout. If we focus on quadrant 3, which is, again, the urgent but not important, like emails, that kind of stuff. We spend most of our time reacting to things that are not urgent. If we focus on quadrant 4, which is again not urgent and not important, then we're basically living an irresponsible life, just kind of winging it, doing whatever comes, getting fired from jobs and being dependent on others. Quadrant 2, which is not urgent but important, is the heart of effective personal management. It deals with things like building relationships and doing the things that are important but not stressful. So that is on number 3. Number 4 habit. Or let me tell you some ways to practice this, by the way. So estimate what time you're spending things on, and estimate and plan on, look at what is the most important things in your life and make sure those become the priority. Hope that makes sense. Okay, good. Next from there, habit 4 is think win-win. So win-win, there's different things in categories with this, which is win-win, both people win. And Covey explained these are 6 interactions of human, or I should say 6 paradigms of human interaction. So there's win-win, there's win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose, win, and then win-win or no deal. So win-win is obviously both people win. Win-lose is if I win, you lose. Lose-win is I lose and you can win. Lose-lose is obviously both people lose. Win is that they don't want necessarily anyone to lose. They just want to make sure they can win. And then lastly is win-win or no deal, which means if you can't make an agreement that's mutually beneficial, it's just no deal. Obviously, the best option is to create the win-win. So some practice to help you get to these type of points in relationships is think about an upcoming interaction you may have with business or that kind of stuff. You want to write down and think from the perspective of the other person and think what are they looking for, what are they trying to accomplish, and then make the offer that would meet those needs and can actually meet your needs as well. Identify 3 important relationships in your life. Think about and feel the balances in each of those relationships. Do you give more than you take? Do you take more than you give? Just look at the ways you can make it more equal. Number 5 is seek to understand, then be understood. This is obviously a very important one. We worked on this a lot at the company. This is just basically a listening concept. The whole point is to make sure you're taking the time to listen and really understand. So before you respond to anybody, one of the practices we had to do was just saying to listen to the person speaking and then repeat back to them what they said. So if someone said, yo, blah, 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 I went to this movie, blah, 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 and I thought it was horrible, blah, blah, blah. You say, okay, so what I'm hearing is you went to this movie and you didn't like it. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I said. Okay, good. That way they can know you understood. And then after they know that you have heard them and understood them, you move into the moving forward into your own thoughts. So we usually respond, and he talks about 4 ways, which is we evaluate, which means we agree or disagree with what was said. We probe, which means we ask questions from our frame of reference. We advise, which I do a lot and have to practice on not doing. Give counsel based on our experience, and then interpret, trying to figure out the other person's motives or behavior based on our own motives and behavior. And again, empathetic listening is the what you want to do, which means, again, communicate with them what you heard and say, what I'm hearing is this. And then once you know that they know that you heard them, then move on to your thoughts and kind of move forward with whatever you think you want to share. 6 is synergy, which is all about creating synergy inside of relationships. One of the examples he gives was plants. If you plant 2 plants together, the roots usually grow together and become stronger. So synergizing is all about valuing the differences with other people, like the mental, emotional, psychological differences between people, and allowing that to make you better. One of the things he talks about is that synergy allows you to value differences in other people and to expand your own perspective. You sidestep negative energy. Instead of judging someone, you just observe and appreciate instead of judging. And then just make sure you're open to other ideas that you may not have thought of before. So as a practice for habit 6, you make a list of people who irritate you. Now think of just the one person that just bugs the world out of you, okay? How are their views differently? Put yourself in their shoes for 1 minute and pretend how it feels to be them. Do you understand them at all? Next time you're in a disagreement with that person, try to understand their concerns and why they disagree with you, And the better you understand, the easier it is to help change their mind or to change your mind, one of the two. And then find the ways that you can work together and see what is it that we're trying to accomplish. Focus on the goal trying to be accomplished instead of on any conflict or issue you may have with them. Lastly, and one of my favorite ones is sharpen the saw. So when Stephen R. Covey came up, he actually spent the whole time talking about this one habit, which is sharpen the saw. Obviously, this goes back to a knife or to a saw, where he talks about trying to cut down. I mean, when he worked with us, he talked about an axe and how he used to work with, he used to chop wood to have warmth, and he had this really, really dull axe, and how it took forever to cut stuff down until he had someone come over and help sharpen his axe, and then he sharpened it up, and after that, he just cut through wood really, really quick. And he used the same thing with sharpen the saw, which means that if you ever do anything with wood and you're trying to cut anything, or even like a knife with meat or anything that has anything to do with a sharp object, if it becomes dull, it is less effective. So the question I'd have you look at, and what he brings up, is, are you sharp or are you dull? Not as in personality dull, but as in you sharp as in your skills. So as an example, like physical dimension, are you eating well, you're resting, or are you exercising? Spiritually, are you meditating, are you communicating with nature, being outside, are you in great literature or music? Mentally, are you reading good books, keeping a journal, and limiting television to things that enrich your life? And social, are you seeking to understand people? Do you have meaningful relationships? And maintaining an abundance mentality. So to practice habit 7 is make a list of activities that would help you renew yourself in every dimension that he brings up, which is social, mental, spiritual, and physical. Are you doing things that help build you and feed you? And then commit to writing down a specific sharpen the saw activity that you can accomplish on a daily basis. So again, these are the 7 habits. This is an incredible book you can spend a lot of time on. Just to review real fast, the 7 habits are, wait for it. 7 habits are being proactive. 2 is begin with the end in mind. 3 is put first things first. 4 is think win-win. 5 is seek to understand, then to be understood. 6 is to synergize, and 7 is to sharpen the saw. Incredible book, you guys. Stephen R. Covey. I have nothing but respect for the guy and for the company and for the content they do. Very, very good book. I highly recommend reading it. Every time I reread a book like this, I think to myself, man, I've got a lot to work on. Even though I used to work there, and even though it was part of my life for so long, I realized there's some things I need to redo again. And so if you're in that same spot with me, no judgment, start a new day, get this done, implement the habits, let's get you going. Thank you so much, you guys. This is Jonathan Mitchell, Unleash Greatness. Find more at unleashg.com. We'll talk soon.